Elizabeth's in the room. Okay. Okay, council, welcome to your June 6th work session. I'll call us to order and turn it over to David Cook.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to jump right to informal reports. So the first informal report is the City of Fort Worth 4th of July operations and communications. And we have Rick Hicks and Assistant Chief Aldridge, if there are any questions. I knew that, and I'm sure they did too. Come on up.
As you're coming, I'll remind you, in addition to talking to us, you're talking to people at home. And so keep them in mind in terms of leaving no stones unturned.
Yes, ma'am. You want to go first? Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Rick Hicks, Fire Marshal. Here we have one of the most celebrated holidays upon us, also our most challenging in regards to firework enforcement. We've been giving it continuous effort, collaborating with PD, attending neighborhood association meetings. We're focused on three things: messaging, how to report fireworks, and our response. And I'll open it up to questions. In regards to messaging, Public Information Officer Trojek's been heavily involved in that. Do you want to speak on kind of what our messaging efforts are? I know social media platforms, Facebook, Nextdoor app, Twitter, those sorts, which I believe we reached close to 350,000 citizens last year. So that's been our main focus, messaging. That's what the feedback we're getting from our neighborhood associations, digital billboards.
I guess the interest I have is more geared towards senior citizens who may not tweet, who may not have access to internet. They only know how to dial a number.
Yes,
and so you'll keep them in mind too.
Yeah, so we also included in that, water bills that are going out are going to have flyers and information. People that pay online, they're going to be that information online as well. So reporting methods, the 4444 number, email, we have a website, those sorts of things. Those methods are going to be included as well in the reporting, in the messaging. So response plan, we're collaborating with PD this year. We're teaming up. We're going to have several teams deployed throughout the city to do the best we can to respond to these calls. Last year, we received about 2,500 calls in an 8-hour span just on the 4th alone, close to 5,000 in a 4-day period between July 1 and July 4. So it really taps our resources. We do the best we can. We're going to give it continuous effort this year as well. So.
I think Carlos had some questions.
Well, first, a statement about messaging. You also have, and I pointed that out to Chief Davis, I saw a billboard, one of the digital changing billboards on 35 headed northbound, just entering Burleson. I think there was a, PSA type message from fire saying fireworks in the city of Fort Worth are illegal. I think that's positive. I don't know how many other billboards we may have, deployed like that. Just a little feedback last year, because I know I used that phone number to call in. When I did call in, the instances of fireworks that I observed or calls that I received about, fireworks being set off by people, I was told to report it via email. Are we still going to have that? Back to Gina's point, I think not just senior citizens, but a lot of people have the expectation that if you call, you're going to get a response, not be told, well, just get on a computer and report it via email.
Right. Yes, sir. And the one thing I forgot to mention, that we're going to have a unified command set up at the JEOC. We're going to be monitoring those calls the best we can, prioritizing, triaging those calls, looking at the hot, dense areas, specifically if there's fires. We had over 300 grass fires last year in an 8-hour period, injuries as well. So we do our best to triage those calls and get to those areas. So,
thank you.
Elizabeth?
I appreciate the water bill and the online, and I'm assuming social media. That was the one thing the IR didn't really capture, was proactively what we're going to do. And I did see that billboard as well, and I think that's a great idea. My question is, are we putting any funding behind digital or TV advertisement? Because social media doesn't have the saturation that we'd all like to think it does.
Right.
And platforms like Hulu, YouTube, Netflix are relatively inexpensive to do short 15-second ads on.
Sure.
And so have we explored that at all to really kind of saturate, particularly in English and in Spanish?
I'm not sure on that. Craig, do you have any information? Excuse me.
So, I'm sorry. Thank y'all for letting us come up today and answer any questions you may have. From a messaging standpoint, with the social media, that has been something that we've kind of really relied on heavily the last couple of years. We have also looked into some of these other avenues to get that messaging out. As of right now, we don't have anything specific to Hulu or to YouTube that you're discussing. But, you know, I kind of talk to everybody and say, hey, if you've got ideas, one of the things I was going to look to do possibly, if, you know, this year is to maybe have some of you guys as well do those quick, just couple of seconds with maybe some messaging in coordination with our kind of view on that, if that would be something you guys may be open to try out in the future. But yeah, so to answer your question right now, we don't have that particular part of it set up.
Can you explore the cost associated with that to see if it's feasible to do this year, and if not,
Yeah, we'll
build it
definitely
into
look
next
into
year?
it. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Any other questions, council? Michael? Sorry.
In terms of the media, the Councilwoman Beck's suggestion, your council is always ready to assist you when it comes to dealing with our public. We do have a pretty skilled AV team here, so they could get something together that is ready to air
Okay.
if you want that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'd be looking forward to talking with y'all after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting together this IR. Just want to say thanks for all the work that y'all do as the fire department to keep our people safe, police department coordinating and everything. Appreciate that a lot. I'll echo what Mayor Pro Tem Bivens said about the notification piece. My old community, but Como and now is in District 6, every year get calls, and you'll get them this year, about all the fireworks going off because they have such tinderbox of homes. So they're very scared about everything going on. And so I appreciate the action there and the communication piece to let them know how they can report it, what they can do. One thing I do want to look at too, and I know it looks from, this is on page 6, and I don't know who's the proper person to sort of respond to this, is it's following the International Fire Code and standards. I get all that. But they're basically the idea of commercial firework displays in neighborhoods. And this happens in some places, and we don't need to go into where, but it's about a 280-foot setback, which I did the numbers, about 5.5 fire trucks where they can set them up in places and they're abut against neighborhoods. It may be great if we have the fireworks part of it in preventing the fire. And I know there's a person on site, I read all through this, but we may look at the noise part of it, if it's right up against someone's home in a neighborhood and what that does for the period of time that those are going off. And I don't know that requires a comment from y'all. I know there was an email that we got. Leanne, if you want to make a comment a little bit on that, about our noise ordinance and what that looks like. But I know it's disturbing some people for a period of time when it's a permit that we've issued.
Yeah, I'm going to let Melinda Ramos, Deputy City Attorney, speak to that.
So the city's noise ordinance doesn't directly regulate the noise from fireworks. However, there is a provision within the noise ordinance that allows a person, if they're being aggrieved by a noise, to make a complaint. It's not a per se, if the fireworks is happening, then it's a noise and it's a nuisance. It's something that actually has to be someone to be a witness to, if a citation's written, and be proven up in front of a judge.
Okay, I just want to put that out there, so it's something we can look at. It's probably too late for this year since it's so close, but it may be something we need to look at as we issue those permits, the proximity to neighborhoods and what that is and how disturbing that is. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, David. Looks like we're done. Oh. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, everybody. That was a nice transition to the next informal report, which is a summary of the Ooby Dooby Festival. Is it Ooby Dooby? I'm going with Ooby Dooby. And to speak about Ooby Dooby at Panther Island Pavilion back in April is Michael Crum, if anybody has any questions.
I'm betting.
Ooby
that y'all want
Dooby.
him.
Ooby Dooby.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Crum, Director of the Public Events Department. And the reason I'm up here this afternoon is because Public Events also manages the city's Office of Outdoor Events. So we were the collector of information coming out of the Ubbi Dubbi or Ooby Dooby concert and are here to answer your questions this afternoon.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Okay, I'll dive in deep. Since 2019, I've dealt with the Ooby Dooby, Ubbi Dubbi, whatever you want to call it, concert impacts to residents, right? Over where I live, it was felt very much, right? And I use the word felt and as opposed to heard, because I think that there is a misunderstanding about low-frequency noise, which is what, this EDM type of music, relies on. I liken it to this, just like a meteorologist says, reads its his temperature gauge and says it's so hot, but it feels hotter because of the heat index. It's the same thing with this type of low-frequency noise. You can have a decibel reader, read it, it'll tell you a reading, but that reading does not accurately reflect the full effects of low-frequency noise. And in fact, you need a certain type of decibel reader, calibrated appropriately to accurately read it. And that's something else that I don't know if I'm going to do an IR, but mean to ask PD whether or not we're equipped with such things. But that's for another discussion. One thing that, and I've been getting a lot of feedback, on this, is that clarification, and maybe this is more of a legal question, but does the city's noise ordinance exempt Panther Island musical events the way it's written? Because even though they have to comply, with the noise or decibel limitations as it applies to the Trinity Uptown area, doesn't it really in effect not give us any sort of legal recourse? That is, you can have somebody down there with an appropriate decibel reader and read it and say, hey, you're in violation of it, but what can you actually do with it because of the exemption?
Yeah, and, subject to my friends in legal correcting me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that, yes, Panther Island is exempt from the noise ordinance.
Okay, so now that begs the question, what are we going to do about it for next time? Because there's already talk about it next time.
Yes, sir. And so, as you may be aware, the Regional Water District, which manages the Panther Island Pavilion and licensed the use of the pavilion, in this case, to a third-party promoter of this show, met and discussed the situation. Their response to that was to change the hours that the pavilion can be used for events. So if you look at page 2 of your IR, now, with the exception of national holidays, the operating hours for the pavilion are restricted to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., going to 11 on holidays. And then Thursday through Saturday, those hours are 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. And again, Melinda, correct me if I'm wrong, but the legal curfew for Panther Island events is 2 a.m. Do I have that right? I'm not aware of that. Here at the meeting have. Okay. Yeah, so we'll clarify
They could have
that for
gone
you,
to
but
2
they
a.m.
have-
is my understanding, but they chose not to.
Sir?
My understanding is we're talking about the time, they could have gone to 2 a.m., but they chose not to.
That's correct. That's my understanding as well.
So not to cut things off, but I wonder if it's maybe helpful if we continue conversations with the Water District, which I know we already have with Dan and his team, before they approve another festival like this one. It wasn't just the time of night, it was just the noise and the disruption. It was surprising to me how far away people complained about the frequency of the noise. So if staff can work with Mike and then work with Dan through David's office, I think that would be helpful to get more awareness around if they approve another permit, whether it's Ubi Doobie or whoever's next. And then also discuss this noise ordinance and how it should pertain to Panther Island as well.
Sure.
That sound good? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Yes.
It's my first time using that since we got all of these reminders every time. I just want to recognize the Fireworks Committee, which is comprised of citizens. They are here. If you guys will stand, I see James and Judy, and people just need. Okay. These are the people who started those talks about 4 years ago. And of course, it comes out of District 5 with some other guests, but that is my point of order. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you all for being here.
coming.
Thank you, Mike. Next informal report is on firearm thefts, and Deputy Police Chief Mark Barthen is available if there are any questions. All right, the next informal report is on security cameras in the Stop 6 area, and Deputy Chief David Carbajal is available if there are any questions.
Yes.
All right, Deputy Chief.
This question came up because when we started the neighborhood improvement strategy, I knew that I was assigned 36 cameras in Stop 6.
Yes,
One was put at a church, and they didn't need it, so we took it back.
thank you for that. They asked me to thank you for allowing us to move that around.
Well, that's the whole idea, because people have been able to feel that they could call their NPO and tell them where they saw activity, and you guys have made arrests and cases, and so where are the cameras now? Well, you may not want to tell us, I don't care, but do we still have these cameras in Stop 6?
Yes, ma'am, there were originally 36 installed, and then we've added 11 more. There's about 3 in disrepair, but we're getting those back up. So the numbers increased from the 36 to about 47, I believe.
Now, I'm going to be reminding Councilmember Nettles, and I'll tell Councilmember Crane, keep up where your cameras are, because if not, they'll end up somewhere they don't need to be. And if the officers know that you know where your cameras are supposed to be, and it's been a real good partnership, and you can actually make some cases. We had a video that Cross used to show around the entire city, how these cameras help prove cases. So they're not as evil as some people would have you think.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And I have a follow-on, Madam Pro Tem, to some of that. But in here, it says their 5-year, their expected life expectancy is 5 years. Are those budgeted for replacement after that time? How does that work in our
We're
budget?
doing about, every year we budget for about maybe 125, and about 100 of those we try and do new, and 25 we try and be replacements. So we're constantly budgeting into replacement. Obviously, we can't predict, but we certainly, we do try and be responsible on budgeting for that.
And Chief, while you're up there, I just wanted to mention the north side area, a certain sector of it is also getting cameras. So to, Mayor Pro Tem's point, just get with me so that I can be aware of where your initial starting points are for those camera locations.
Absolutely, sir. We'll include you in that conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next informal report is on the 2023 Transportation Alternatives Federal Funding Applications, and Kelly Porter is available if there are any questions.
Yes.
Kelly, come on down. It's not Kelly.
It's not Kelly. As many of you knew, this is not Kelly. I'm filling for Kelly. I'm Mike Lanvick, Transportation Planning Manager in TPW in Kelly's group. And this resolution went to the council last week, or the 23rd, and we submitted 3 federal funding applications to TxDOT, one on McPherson Boulevard, one on Everman Parkway, and then Phase 2 of Bomber Spear Trail. So, any questions?
Yes, can you just give a quick summary of the McPherson Summer Creek? I know officers received a number of calls over the years about the importance of transportation safety, and these 2 arterials are 2 that are important in those conversations. So just for public awareness, could you share what y'all applied for and what it would do?
Sure. And I'll start by saying that we selected these projects based on a few things. ones that have shown up in the higher engineering network. They're also based on planning, previous planning work, like our active transportation plan, and then also ones where we could leverage opportunities with funding partners, and then maybe some additional funding we're already needing to do, like on overlays and restriping, that sort of thing, or restriping at least in the McPherson case. So this project is going to be looking at multimodal safety benefits. A lot of it is looking at the bike lanes out there in the current striping. And so essentially what this project is going to do is it's going to do a 5-foot bike lane with the addition of a 1-foot buffer, raised buffer, along Old McPherson between basically Chisholm Parkway over to Hewlin. And then it's going to do additional bike lanes from like down to the middle school there on Summer Creek, up to Risinger. And then some additional safety benefits like crosswalks, some specific pedestrian signals, and some other safety improvements. It's kind of in the preliminary stage. We've done some preliminary scoping and estimating work, but it'll be obviously developed through the future design process if funded.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought the pedestrian too. Just appreciate all the work that y'all have done on that, especially as we coordinate with parks and open space to develop systems of trails that are actively in the work. So thank you for that as well. Looking forward to that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we get the award.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Next informal report is on architectural services for the remodel of this building right here, current City Hall, and a new parking structure. And Steve Cook is available if there are any questions. All right.
We talked about this yesterday, but I just want to put it on the record for today. In this IR, it talks about evaluating also PD communications coming over here, but we are also in this scope able to evaluate retrofit of some facilities to permanently put a new downtown library here, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All right. The next informal report is on automated external defibrillators deployed at park and recreation facilities.
Yes, just a really quick summary.
Okay.
I know we had this
Dave?
last time. And Dave, while you're coming up, thank you for briefing us on this.
There he comes.
Monica McBride Debs is a constituent that lives in District 6. I mentioned it last time, but she lost her son at football practice, and the AED wasn't in arm's length. And so she started a foundation, and they engage our office a number of times on initiatives that they're doing in regards to having AEDs available for youth sports. So I appreciated the briefing you gave me, and glad you came back. That way we can share it broadly.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Dave Lewis, Interim Director of Park and Recreation. I think the information that's most important for you is that we do have 10 field monitors that we employ at all the fields when they're rented, and they each have a mobile unit that they carry with them. And so when they're on site, they are able to go ahead and take care of any incidents that arise.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
The next informal report is on budget and tax note requirements, and Mark McDaniel is available if there are any questions. All right, roll into the next one, which is the fiscal year 2024 budget, public engagement, budget and property tax setting calendar and schedule of meetings.
Of course.
Mark is available if there are any questions.
The biggest concern I've had, Mark, before you arrived with the city is how we notify and where we hold these public meetings. In the past, we had them in each council district. There was pushback from that from staff. It's important to me that the public knows exactly where they can get this information, so that's the reason why I wanted you to talk.
Yes, we are aware of that, and so we're working on the plan now. Some of you have already talked to me about places you'd like to have your meetings, and so we'll reach out to the rest of you if we have not heard from you, but working with Renee's group to put those together.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next informal report is on code enforcement calls for service, and Brandon Bennett is available if there are any questions.
None from me.
I do have one, David. Brandon.
Brandon?
Hey, how are you? I'll make it quick. Looking at District 3, there's been a really large increase in resident and officer-initiated calls, and it looks like to multifamily and property maintenance, if you look at the second page of this. Is that due to we now have a code officer?
Yeah, so what happens is it's a lot like when you put extra police officers in a certain part of town, it looks like the crime rate went up, when in fact you just have more officers that are addressing some of the crime that wasn't being addressed before. So that drives some of the numbers, but I think those are really good questions that I would want to confirm the answers for, and so we'll get back with your office. And one of the things we are going to do, also, we didn't include it in the IR, we missed it, is we have new council members on board, and this is a really good time to really go back and either meet with you all or your aides and really find out, based on right here and now, today, what are your priorities for code complaints? Like, what are the things you really want us to focus on moving forward? So we'll be doing that as part of our orientation with the new council members, and we'll make sure we reach out to the existing council members also.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm sure my colleagues do too. One question I did have, just because we have the new code officer dedicated to Las Vegas Trail area, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback from the neighborhoods there. So that's probably where that multifamily's gone up, and I would like that information. What does property maintenance mean, though?
Yeah, so
You split out weeds and other things, high grass, so what is?
Property maintenance is a generic term that there's an international property maintenance code. That's where it comes from. And so that's where you have properties where they have collected like junk and it's not really garbage, but it's like hoarders, right? You know, sometimes that fits with some of our zoning codes. Like a couple weeks ago, Councilmember Beck raised a concern about people storing stuff on their front porches. That's a very low priority, and we need to be careful about that. But we also need to make sure we don't turn a blind eye at the same time to when somebody has a lot of like appliances and freezers that kids can get into and stuff like that on their front porch.
Okay. You may go look at my dad's property, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We're trying to get him to remove it, but. Thank you, that's all.
You can call us anonymously.
Okay. The next informal report is on Environmental Collection Center amendments and a proposed fee increase for other municipalities and government entities. And again, Brandon Bennett is available if there are any questions. Moving on. Next informal report is on Community Center Security, and Sonia Singleton and Kelly Picard are available if there are any questions.
Sure.
Kelly, Sonia?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Hey, y'all, I personally said sure, just to give an update for the public's awareness and for our own.
Well, I'll begin. I think we are hyper aware of the important value of who we work with, your children, our seniors, and others who visit our community centers. So we made sure that we set up training for all of our staff. The training was entitled Avoid, Deny, Defend Active Shooting Training. So all of our community center staff have attended that. We have panic buttons installed at all of our community centers. And we will be doing soft lockdown for our summer day camps. Kelly, would you like to continue?
Just to continue with that, we started the soft lockdowns last summer after the incident that happened at another community's summer day camp on the first day. And so like Sonia said, we're just trying to make sure we take every precaution, not just to protect the people attending our programs, but also our staff, because we understand that sometimes these type of programs can be a target. And so we just want to ensure the safety.
I really appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for the work y'all do and the proactive approach. With the panic button, just for folks who don't know what that is, that's basically you can push that button and it would get a priority 1 response from a 911. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Michael?
I just do have one, and this, I'm glad we had the meeting this morning that we did, but I noticed for that 6, the late night program, CCPD funded, is not at LVT Rise Community Center.
Correct.
So I'd like to explore that as part of future funding. I mean, we're talking about underserved communities that we seem to hit a lot of them, but we missed that one for sure.
I think your request is very timely.
Yeah. Whoever's taking notes, yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Don't leave yet.
Okay.
The next informal report is on out-of-school food programs, and they're here to answer any questions you might have.
We also shared
Yes,
a lot of emails.
Councilmember.
Thanks. We had a lot of email. Thanks for going back and forth. I'm glad we had that meeting this morning too. But I'll point out that the closest to Las Vegas Trail is already Evans. I know there's another program in there, and it seemed to be confusion. And I think that's just general. What I said earlier today is get this on the record, that when we're thinking about programming in our community centers and other things, we can't forget that RISE is a community center. It's not city-run. It's privately or through the nonprofit. But I want to make sure we don't forget that as we're going through all of our programs at the city, to make sure that we're recognizing that they're still part of the community center network.
I think that you are certainly correct in that, advising us of doing that. One of the things I did after our meeting, I called City Square just to check on whether or not there was a site. And the Boys and Girls Club runs a site at that facility at the RISE Community Center. But I believe that most of our sites are open sites. So if a child that's not enrolled in their program wants to come eat, we are supposed to serve them. So I'm working with City Square, with Paige, the Executive Director of RISE Community Center, for us to establish the right amount of, number of meals that should be delivered, and perhaps do some retraining also.
I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure there's no kid going hungry over there.
Absolutely.
So thank you for looking into that.
Absolutely.
Sonia, I'm sorry, Sonia Kelly, before you leave, just to put a bug in your ear, since you're going to be looking at community facilities, and this is a timely, request, I think. You have a facility that's owned by the city of Fort Worth there at Rose Marine Theater that houses Artes de la Rosa. They have, for example, Artist Academy, right, which caters to children, young children, through the arts. It gives them, programming, through the fine arts. They don't have any kind of provisions. That building is in need of some, upgrades and maintenance. One of the things they don't have is a panic button, and yet it houses children, right? And then it has children that come from different parts of the city, participate in this program. So my request would be that you look at that as well.
All right, then we will look at that, and I'll call upon my friend Steve Cook to help
Good,
us
yeah.
looking at that.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
my early, Christmas in July ask.
All right.
Yeah. Alan, go ahead.
I keep trying to sit
So,
down.
thank you for all this. This is critical, to make sure that we have access to food, especially our underprivileged. As I was going through the list, one thing I noticed is that there's nothing in District 10 between our list and Fort Worth ISD's after-school program. We've got 95,000 residents, and I know Northwest Keller ISD and EMS that serve do programs, but they weren't listed here. And so my question is, if someone needs help and they text food or call the line, do they get referred to those programs? How do we get people informed when they're
Yes.
outside of this immediate area?
211 has the most current list of sites that offer the summer meal program, offer breakfast, lunch, and afternoon snack. And simply dialing 211 or texting to the number that's in the IR, which is trying to, for the benefit of those.
304, 304.
Thank you. Text food to 304, 304.
I have a couple questions. So I see that we have City Square. Is that the only operating entity, nonprofit, that's feeding all of these sites?
For right now, yes, it is. At one time, the city of Fort Worth, for about 50 years, we ran a program, and we had perhaps up to 60 sites that we served, but it's a very difficult program to run in that the reimbursement rate is so slim. And so to break even, let alone try to make a profit. And so City Square has been one of the most successful programs. The food bank has run the program for a short while. who else, Kelly, do you?
Those are the only two I
Yeah,
remember.
Jim. And it's just, it's very taxing, and it helps that they do food as a business.
Right. I'm very familiar with the CACFP program and the SFSP program as well. And I know with the Fort Worth ISD, for their after-school programs, because it's so many schools that they do, they normally do an RFP, or they normally do a different organizations coming in instead of just one providing all these meals to these sites. And so did we explore other entities within Fort Worth to provide meals as well?
We have not.
Okay. I think that would be something to look for in next summer, is because it's a nonprofit, but it's also a business and an organization. And we don't want to just choose one individual or one group within the city of Fort Worth to provide all these meals for all our children. The second question is, these meals should be open sites. And I think you mentioned that. And City Square should be able to tell us that right off, because when you apply for the SFP, you have to apply for open or closed sites. And if they are closed, we need to make sure that next summer that they are open, because students or kids may not always go and get that meal. And what I have learned in participating in this program is that they get it on the days that they need it. And so, which means that they might not be enrolled because they can't get to that program every single day for that time allotted. But the days that they can get there, we want to make sure that those sites are open. So I'm very interested to know each one of these sites, if they're open or closed.
All of the City of Fort Worth community centers are open sites.
Okay, through the CAs, through the summer program, because when you mentioned earlier, you said, I think that they're open, but
I was specifically speaking about the site that's at Rise Community, Rise Community Center.
Okay.
What does open mean? It's something code?
No, so when you apply for these programs, you either have an open site. Open site means that anybody, any child off the street can come even if they're not in the program.
Okay.
A closed site is where you list, I have 50 kids, and these are the 50 kids that's going to eat here every single day.
Okay.
And no one else can participate in that program.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions? Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. The next informal report is on market pay adjustments for hard-to-fill positions, and Deanna Giordano is available if there are any questions.
I just have one question. Thank you. With the pay increases that are projected, because it was a 2.5% across the board for these positions that you listed, does that 2.5 put us at market or competitive rate for all of these positions? Or was it just a budgetary decision to cap that at 2.5?
Yeah, this was a budgetary decision, and we had a couple of efforts going on. This is very specific to hard-to-fill positions. And so we've been continuously monitoring the attraction and retention efforts of the city, and these are positions that have been identified as hard to fill or have high turnover, where there's duplicate efforts to recruit. The reason these positions were targeted was for that purpose, but the reason the 2.5% set aside was added to their base pay was to allow us to retain those individuals, to demonstrate our value to those employees that help the city run every day. A lot of these positions are frontline positions, and it was also as a retention strategy, but also as an attraction strategy as well. So if we can increase their base pay and be more market competitive, we can attract individuals with that same level of market competitiveness as well. So it was very specific to those groups of positions that we identified.
And so within those groups, with that 2.5%, in comparison to, have we done the analysis of what that market is for other cities, and where does that 2.5 put us? Because if my concern is 2.5 is great, and I'm sure that these employees greatly appreciate that. But if that's not enough to make us competitive, then what is? And if it's 2.5, it's 2.5.
Yeah, it's 2.5. We had a second component that was coupled with this where we did do market competitiveness surveys and looked at how we pay in comparison to how other cities pay and even private sector. And so we have additional information and changes that we're recommending in the FY24 budget. This was just, there was an opportunity for us to make an immediate budget impact, particularly for these hard-to-fill positions, so we made that more immediate. And in fiscal year '24, we have additional efforts that we're proposing.
Thank you for doing that. I look forward to seeing that in the budget.
Chris?
I have a question. I've recently been going back and forth to the back center, and I know we have, I don't know what that position is called, but the position that's in the front, is that the security guard or, I'm sorry? Facilities coordinator. Okay, I'm not sure if it's on this list or not. And I know that, I think we changed, the back center used to be open till 11 o'clock and now it's moved to 7. I don't know when that change took place. But I'm asking that question because I wonder what that, did we consider that position too as for the pay increase? Because I'm not sure what that payment is, but I know some staffers that do that position, not just the back center, other locations, are working 2 jobs to kind of make ends meet.
Yeah, and so I'm not familiar, that position is not on this list. Is there something you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just touch briefly on the back in particular. So the hours were changed about a couple of years ago, and that was really more a relation of our security guard contract. So the facilities coordinator not only kind of handles some of the on-site maintenance, but he's also the security guard. But the 40 hours that he works, there's also supplemental hours that we have a security contract under the city that they come in and do that. So that's why those hours are kind of shortened, just to make sure that we stayed under our costs on the overall city security contract. But yeah, it was a part of the study that it's been undertaken.
Okay, so do we outsource that position?
We outsource for the evening hours, so from 5 to 7, that's an outsourced security guard that's there.
Okay. I have more questions, but I'll ask you offline. Thank you.
Next informal report is on proposed strategic investment plan and capital projects mapping. And Eric Flatiger is available if there are any questions. All right, next informal report is on requirements and costs to open a small business in Fort Worth. And DJ Harrell and Robert Stearns are available if there are any questions. DJ, Robert.
Thanks, y'all, for putting this together that I requested with all the other work that we're doing. And I really, based on the question, we say we're a business-friendly city, but are we? And so that's the reason we created a small business task force to sort of work through these things. Just really quickly, I want you to tell everybody all the things in here that we've done already to help small businesses as part of this.
Sure, I'll kind of start and DJ can hop in on the development side. So just to give us some background on this, the Institute for Justice is a kind of national advocacy group that really kind of goes out to cities and looks at a lot of different issues. So back in 2022, they conducted a study of about 20 large to mid-sized companies and large-sized cities, and we're looking really at the challenges that small businesses were facing as they were trying to get open, trying to get established. And this time it actually coincided very well with some work Councilmember Crane was already doing as it related to the Small Business Task Force. So when we saw the results of that study, we asked the IFJ to come in Fort Worth and take a look at our processes. So Fort Worth was not part of that original study. IFJ came in and looked at Fort Worth and really gave us an analysis. So in the IR, they kind of focused on 5 business types: restaurants, retail bookstores, food trucks, barbershops, and home-based tutoring. So that were kind of the 5 business categories that they looked at. So they did a review of Fort Worth processes. And you'll notice in the report, there were a few things that they looked at kind of in the other 20 cities that were really not necessarily applicable to Fort Worth. And so DJ worked with the code department to review what they had put together, did some additional analysis. And so in the IR, you've got the chart, basically the overall cost for what a 1,000 square foot restaurant would look like. And you see Fort Worth is pretty much in line with the other cities that were reviewed under the study. One thing that we are, kind of looking at the charts in the IR, challenged are, so our costs are pretty much in line, but the number of permits, the number of processes that are required for small businesses kind of we're leading the pack. And so part of what we've been working with and what DJ's been working on is one.
Leading the pack, not in a good way.
Leading the pack, not in a good way, yes. So how do we kind of look at the processes we have in place? Are there permits that can be eliminated? Are there things that can be streamlined? And so that's really the work that DJ has been working on. So I'll let him kind of address the peer development stuff.
So, in addition to a lot of the process improvement things that we're looking into, what we found is also, applicants were saying that they're uninformed about the process and what process they need to enter into to get a certain thing done in the city of Fort Worth. So what we've done is we published a number of guides. So we've published a commercial development guide, a restaurant development guide. We also posted informational videos walking folks step by step through the application process online, right, which are narrated by one of our staff members to help them, apply for the different permit types that they have. We also hosted our first, but not the last, Development 101 series, where we just took the show on the road to the, potential entrepreneurs and developers and, citizens seeking a permit. We want to meet them where they are and just walk them through what is plating, what is zoning, what is, a mechanical permit, when do you need it, right? Backflow and all those things. So we're really, focusing on education as well as streamlining in order to kind of, respond to some of the concerns that were posed.
And in response to that too, there was one of the things that they pointed out is a one-stop shop.
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you can talk about that?
Yeah. So again, one thing that they mentioned in looking at some of the other cities is that Fort Worth didn't really have a consolidated, one link to a website where they could go, where the small business could go and find information. So we had lots of different resources on lots of different websites. Some of that was on economic development, some of that was development services, some of it were outside agencies. And so we worked with development services and IT to really try to collapse all of that into kind of a single landing page that walks you from basic questions of how to start a business, how to put together a business plan, to how you can access some funding opportunities, to more of the detailed stuff about accessing Acela and permits and things like that. So it really does provide a much more streamlined process. We're still getting feedback from the small business community on, is it meeting your needs? Are there more things that we need to add to that site? So it's still going to be a little bit of a work in progress. But I think it's a big step from where we were prior to this study as opposed to where we are today.
That's great. And there's actually a dedicated person within development services that focuses on small business. Others can do it, but there's a dedicated person now to help.
Right. So in both economic development and development services, we've hired small business liaisons. So on the economic development side, they have a person that assists them there. But if it's a small business that needs to get a CO or go through the remodel process to get started up and running, we have an individual now that's in our facilitation program that will walk them through and act as their concierge on the city side.
Something. I just want to say I'm proud of y'all's work and proud of what you're doing. I don't know if my colleagues have any questions for you, but all that work you're doing is really adding to making this more accessible. I've often said that people are dreaming around their dining room table, and this gives them something to go to look and maybe execute on that small business. And anybody that's ever opened a small business in the city can tell you that it is a process to get through, that you don't have the resources that large companies do to maneuver through that process. So anything we can do to make it easier would be great. And I do want to say that I looked at a lot of these actual permits that we have to do. They're not all City of Fort Worth, some are state, some are county or through the county process. But I do want to continue to work on maybe some of the costs here that it costs to open a small business, and I'll continue to work with you on that. Thanks.
I think Mayor Pro Tem Bivens and then Carlos.
Yeah, I'll just add something, and I think, Robert, you were probably in Arlington then, but this is not the first time we've done this. We opened up a one-stop shop probably back in 1999, if my memory serves me properly, because I was at Fox 4.
Right.
I don't know what happened that we lost it, but it's good if we can keep good ideas and not have to keep recreating the wheel. And the other comment I have involves efficiencies. And this is your shop, DJ. I think it's important that when people come, you really want to know that they're ready to come. And you know, we've had this conversation before. There should be a checklist as to what an applicant has to have in place before they get a chance to sit down for that first PDC. If not, they're wasting your time and theirs. And so I hope the tools that you guys have created, you'll have that checklist. It's like, don't come here if you don't have this plan, because they'll come on sympathy and a smile, but you've wasted time. And so that's what I offer to this discussion.
Carlos?
Just a clarification, Robert and DJ. And Michael, I think we may have had a related conversation before, within the context of the committee, but support what you're, proposing to do here. And since it's in-house, my question is this: how much, if any, do we have input from the chambers? Specific to me is this: if this is a one-stop shop kind of approach, what are we doing for the small business entrepreneurs that are Spanish-speaking only, for instance? Are we also capturing their needs as well with this?
Yeah, I think from economic development standpoint, again, obviously, we work very closely with Annette and the Hispanic Chamber on the initiatives that they're doing. Again, she just got a grant that she's working on to support small businesses. We've supported their pitch competition. So there's a number of activities that we've engaged with them in on just advancing and being able to scale small businesses. I think from our standpoint, our challenge is some of this material that we put together, we just want to make sure that it's advanced in different languages so people can be able to access those sites and understand what's going on there, and then try to get that information out and work with the chambers to help us spread the word on it.
Same here. All right, we work really closely with Annette. In fact, she holds a seat on our Development Advisory Committee, and she also was a partner. All three chambers were partners with us on the Development 101 training that we provided. We also have staff translators, for Spanish-only speaking customers as they come in.
Good, that's good to hear. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next informal report is on Tarrant County 911 District and a number of issues, and Valerie Washington is available if there are any questions. All right, the final informal report is on zoning notifications, and Stephen Murray and Michelle Goot are available if there are any questions.
Yes.
Councilmember Beck and Councilmember Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are y'all doing tonight?
Good. Thanks, Stephen. And I know we went through this previously with a zoning case on Hemphill about whether or not the sign needs to be located. And we know that legally speaking, there doesn't have to be a physical sign on the location property. Can you walk me through, if I want a zoning change request, how does that sign get up on that piece of property? If you could kind of lay that out first.
Sure. Our TPW department are the ones that actually put the signs out. So what we do is we send them a notification list monthly on signs that need to be placed. So we'll send them a map with kind of a X marks the spot type thing that shows them where they need to put them. They go out and they place them out on the property for that zoning change. So that's a monthly thing. And then whenever the sign needs to be removed, we do the same. We send them a list of signs that need to be removed, and they are removed.
Okay, and so I guess the placement and removal of that sign is incorporated as part of the fee required for requesting a zoning change?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And so if we're doing it on a monthly basis, because we have the 10 days and the 15-day outlined in the IR, if we're doing that on a monthly basis, does that create a situation where a sign might not be put up within, say, 15 days, or do they typically get 30 days? That's my only concern, is if we're doing it once a month, are we keeping up with it?
We try to get those out as quickly as possible. So for example, you may see the courtesy notifications and standard notifications go out later than the signs. The signs go out pretty quickly. As soon as we kind of have a map, the zoning case is mapped. That's to ensure that TPW has enough time to put them out, because they're going around to the different sites. So they're one of the earliest forms of notification that we try to get out.
Okay, and so I want to be clear, it's not a legal requirement, but it is a service that the city provides as part of our zoning.
It's in our ordinance, but it doesn't preclude a case to move forward. Like, let's say there wasn't a sign that was placed out, we could still act on that case.
we legally could still act on that case.
That's correct.
And so is there any mechanism for us to know when a sign doesn't go out? And the reason, let me kind of back up and tell you why I'm asking all these questions.
Sure,
So, I mean, I think we all remember that particular zoning case when
do,
it didn't
yeah.
go up. And let me say, I really appreciate that you're adding that capability for people to sign up for zoning notifications so they don't, they can be outside of a neighborhood organization, or maybe they don't have a very organized neighborhood association, but they can still be informed via email about zoning changes. So thank you for that. I think that's going to go a long way to inform people about zoning changes. But there are some folks, if you're like me, I don't want another email in my inbox. But if I'm driving down the street and I see a zoning change sign, it's probably going to pique my interest, and then I'm going to go check it out. And so I think those signs are really important because they help the broader community understand that there's a zoning change going there. And so I want to make sure that every zoning request has one of those up so that our neighbors know that. And so what can we do to ensure that that happens? And if it doesn't happen, what can you do to communicate to us? Because my preference would be I would continue that case or, work with the neighborhood or the community to make sure that they have been properly notified.
Sure, and that's a good question. So typically, once the signs are installed, we get a confirmation from TPW that they're installed. The second thing is, in order to kind of provide as backup for us, we've created a online map that shows where all the zoning cases are. And that way, we're kind of backing ourselves up to say, hey, we've put signs out. But in addition to that, if you go online, you can go to our storyboard and see where all the zoning cases are for that month. And we do that really early in the process. So we're kind of getting the signs out, and we're getting anybody who wants to go look as far as that's concerned. Regarding the confirmation is just that I described earlier. With TPW, they send a sign. They send us a list back saying that it's complete. And then, every once in a while, somebody may take a sign off of the property or something along those lines. So we do our best to make sure that the signs are put out.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful to know. I didn't realize that we had that type of documentation. So in the event someone says, well, there wasn't a sign, that also helps us navigate. We can say, well, there was, but, something happened or whatever.
As far as the notification, we're also working with our TPW partners to have photographs taken as they're placed, and then they'll go into our permitting system. So we'll have it documented.
Thanks, TJ.
And before you all walk away and before y'all get too excited, I've heard all that before. What I have. Is there anything that precludes you from putting it in the application process, putting the onus on the applicant? Because one thing Bob Willoughby is right about is that our zoning notification dependency on signs is not what it should be. And, for me, I've never denied a case or delayed one because it wasn't there. But I can tell you there are signs that are up all around the city. It's been up for about 4 or 5 years. I can prove it. And so the dependency on TPW does not give you that 100% compliance. And so have you all thought about having the applicant be responsible for his or her own signage?
Sure, we've looked into that, and a couple of things on that. Number one, when we put it on them, we would have to store a large number of signs, or the applicant would have to go and pick up a sign from a sign company. So that just seemed kind of wonky, for lack of a better term, in our opinion. We can trust TPW for the most part, and they're a great partner.
Little shade there, okay.
I mean, they've been working with us for a long time on this, and they're doing their best. But we've looked at all the other options, and we just think TPW is the best option at this point.
Stephen, what I did for you was save you, so that when these folk around this table realize that a sign's not up, because maybe we had a 5-day rain or something happened, and TPW couldn't own up to their part of that deal, at least these folk won't beat up on you. But don't think it's going to be perfect, people.
Yeah, and we understand that, like, the sign thing can be a little bit frustrating. That's why we've gone to other forms, i.e. putting our zoning notifications up as early as possible on that thing. So if anybody wants to go in and find out where a zoning case is happening, they can just go online right now and look at a map and see all around the city, District 6 and District 5, District 8, where are all those zoning cases at? So we don't have to rely solely on signs to let people know. In addition to that, we'll have that email list. So we're trying to cover our bases here.
Well, with Councilwoman Beck's approval, I'll probably be asking for this again because Sandy just gave me a wonderful idea. So I won't delay today, Mayor, but let's talk about it some more. There's got to be a better way to do it.
Thanks, Sandy.
Was there any sarcasm in that, or?
No.
We're genuine, okay, just making sure. Carlos, go ahead.
Okay.
Carlos and then Jared.
Well, if I don't take this opportunity to go ahead and reemphasize what's been said, I would be remiss because even before I served on this council and was on the zoning commission, you'll remember this. We had this discussion. Dana, you'll remember it too. Because at the time, we were considering, going to TPW, hoping that that would provide us more timely, installation of signage, because that was an issue then. It's still an issue now. I'll give, I guess, some leeway to TPW. Maybe there has been improvement. I don't know. I don't understand. We're a big city. We got a lot of zoning cases. I'm not trying to make excuses. But, if we have provisions for notification, we should endeavor to make those notifications timely. And, we need to abide, by our own rules. That's just my feeling on it. But I do tend to agree we can't solely rely on one form of notification, but at the same time, we shouldn't be too lax about it as well. If we say we're going to notify this way, we must notify that way and make every reasonable, effort to do so. Because I had similar cases where, in fact, when I became a council member, there wasn't a sign up there. And, I went out to the site, I called the city and said, where's the sign? They said, it should be there. And I said, I agree, it should be there, but it's not here. And I'm here and I'm looking. And so it came to pass that, yes, it was in the process, right, that it came to finally be installed. But I know that, different people rely on different methods to get notified and all that, and we should continue to improve it. So just wanted to, add that for good measure. I know you're aware, Stephen, and again, Dana, I know you're aware, I've heard this before, but I think it bears repeating.
Yes, sir, thank you. And like DJ had mentioned, I think taking pictures of the signs and will really help ensure that there's nothing missing to that end.
Jared.
Awesome, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Stephen. I'd like to call Renee up if that's okay. I particularly appreciated the proposed notification as far as establishing a listserv for residents to subscribe to district-specific zoning alerts. Can you describe kind of for the audience what that would do, and then also what's the timeline in implementing that?
So what this does is just add another layer of the ways that we can communicate zoning notifications. Of course, we do the mandatory paper mailing to those within the required footage. We would do the signage. What this would allow for is as that zoning case is posted and becomes public within each of the districts on our website, you can actually subscribe if you have an interest in certain areas of news. If you're really interested in parks news or library news, there's now going to be a zoning news section, and you can sign up by district. So when we received the request from you to look at how we could do this, and we met with Dana and DJ and the group, what we determined is for now that's going to have to be a manual process. We'll receive the zoning notifications to our staff, and then we'll put them and tag them, and the email would go out automatically for residents that had signed up for zoning notifications. So again, a layer of transparency and a layer of a different way that we can communicate it. And we had talked with DJ about the fact that as we progress, we could look to improving the software so that it becomes a more automated process. And so when folks are interested now, there will be a zoning section. They can pick their district that they're interested in, and then they'll receive the notifications as those become public.
Thank you. And then as far as timeline, and then I'm going to add one more question onto that. It'll also include the link back to the zoning website in those emails if they want to go back to that dashboard as well. Is that correct?
To be able to, yes.
Okay, great.
And in our email template, we can include anything that we want that notifies the residents of that, and we are looking to have that up in a matter of weeks.
It'll have all the information that the neighborhoods get. It'll have the application.
That's perfect.
Map and location, proposed zoning, and then contact information.
That's great. Thank y'all for that.
And David, is staff still working on that geographic tool I asked for so that when you sign up, we on the council will know exactly how far away you are from the applicant address?
I believe so. I'll follow up on that.
Do y'all know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, for the knower, it's important that when we're up there looking at these cases, you may have people who live in Dallas, and they're speaking on your case. Not saying that they can't, but it just pays to know where people live. And so I've asked staff to develop some type of tool or mechanism so that it's automatically calculated and we see that and we know how far they are.
Mayor
So
Pro
that's-
Tem, if it's okay, I asked DJ to explain it. I love that. I would love to have that information
We'll
as
keep
well.
on bugging them until they get it done.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, yes, ma'am. Jeanette and Kevin and I are, we've met a couple of times to discuss, ways that we can accomplish that. We're looking at a few different softwares to see if we can make it automated where we don't have to have a staff, at the last minute trying to map it during the meeting. But in the meantime, the plan is to provide that map by just traditional means, having a staff member just provide that information. We don't have a start date, but we plan to come back with an IR to let you know our progress. Yes, ma'am.
Just, Renee, real quick, I just wanted to tag on. I really like the proposal for communication of zoning cases going forward and the higher touch element of it. The one other area, the community engagement office and the zoning 101 presentations, you're reworking that. When can I start offering that to my constituents?
There is a catalog of things, Neighborhood Association 101, how to come to speak. And so as we are developing those, I am of the understanding that those that are posted, and I'll have to double check and get back with you if Zoning 101 is posted. Those that are posted are ready to go. And the next iteration of what be able to be presented, I should say, and the next iteration of that would be, we currently have a video production manager that will manage our television station and do a variety of videos, quality videos that we could use, and we'll be recording those so that maybe if you don't have the opportunity to go to your neighborhood association or you're not affiliated with them, you'd have these kind of library of presentations available to watch at your leisure.
I appreciate it. If you could get back with me specifically on the zoning 101, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
If you'd like to, we have, currently, we have a PowerPoint presentation. I can send it over to you and we can place it on our website for neighborhoods in the meantime. Okay? All right.
Thank you. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay, council, do we have any questions on zoning cases coming up on June 13th? Okay, what you got, Gina?
On ZC 23055, that's going to be problematic. I remanded that to the zoning commission. I think there's been tree clear cutting already, so just get ready for some controversy. And they're already operating on things that they were not supposed to be, so I'm very concerned.
5.5, this one is a different one from the one you're referring to. This one's an existing site that has industrial buildings already on it. And back in the day, it was council-initiated rezoning to G, intensive commercial. So they wanted to allow additional type of uses outside of G, intensive commercial, in order to fill their buildings that are already kind of industrial in nature. That's why they're going to PD. So this one's kind of a different one. I know which one you're talking about,
Okay,
but this one's a
okay.
different one. And if we want to talk offline on that one, we can.
Especially those porta potties, since they don't have any running water.
Yeah, that one's going to zoning commission the day after, the 14th, and then it'll come to you on the 27th.
Okay, thank you.
Either. Carlos?
Stephen, you know about this already. I corresponded with you, ZZ 23-056. I think you're going to get me some questions of whether or not they've actually communicated the applicants with the Registered Neighborhood Association, right? And then the
Yes,
two
sir.
other concerns that I mentioned, parking being the other. so.
Okay, and we could talk offline on that one. That one's on Azle Avenue, so it's a pretty commercial.
It is a
corridor,
commercial
so,
corridor.
yeah.
It's the property itself, the characteristics of it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
No others? And anything on the M&C log that was problematic for anyone? No? Okay, then I will turn it over first to Fernando Costa. I know we have lots of guests. You don't need to come up here at all? Come on, Fernando. I also know that we have Lily Biggins and Leonard Firestone on remotely. Thank you both for taking the time. And we have several special guests, including Glenn Lewis, Task Force Vice Chair, and Dr. John Barnett as well, and former Councilwoman Ann Zeta. Thank you all for joining us. And I think, if you don't mind, Fernando, have everybody stand up that's here today, that's taken the time to be with us.
Members of the 1300 Gundy Task Force, if you would please stand to be recognized. Mayor, you'll recall that the City Council back in February adopted a resolution to appoint this 16-member task force for the purpose of studying future uses of the property most popularly known as the Community Arts Center in the Cultural District. And you appointed then Councilmember Leonard Firestone to chair that task force. Leonard is online, and Madam Mayor, we'd like to ask Mr. Firestone if he would say a word of greeting. Leonard.
Thanks so much, Fernando. It's nice to see everybody. You all look well. But I do apologize for not being with you today because I'm very proud of the work that the task force has done since February when the mayor asked us to address the issues at the building. And, you know, I think you're going to find that what we had through that process, what we discovered was a number of things that started principally with addressing the issues of the building, which is in real disrepair and in need of a sizable investment to get it back in shape. But in considering that, what the task force and really all the stakeholders involved locally with the arts engaged in was not only to fix the building, but also try to reimagine what it could be and how it could simply be better. And I think that's where we ended up. But we did want to share the process, which was very important, of how we got to that point. So again, I'm very proud of the work of the task force and thankful for everyone being there today.
Thank you, Mr. Firestone. And not only has Mr. Firestone served ably as chair of the task force, but equally important, we've had an able vice chair, former State Representative Glenn Lewis, who is juggling multiple responsibilities, among which is the search for a new president at Texas Wesleyan University, for which he serves as chair of their Board of Trustees. Mr. Lewis has stepped in ably on multiple occasions to lead the task force, and he's here to present the task force's final report, along with Dr. John Burnett and former Councilmember Ann Zeta. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you very much, Fernando. And first of all, I'd like to extend our thanks to our chairman, Leonard Firestone. I know he would like to be here today because he has led us very ably through this process, and I want to express my appreciation to him for that. I'm here to sort of open up the discussion, and then I'm going to pass it off to greater minds than mine and let them get into the details of it. But I'm going to open and I'm going to close. Those of you who are trial lawyers on this council, you understand what that means. I'm going to open and close. And first of all, I'm going to talk about the responsibilities that the task force has. We were charged with reviewing the building condition, the 2022 building condition assessment, and assess the existing and potential uses of the building, assess assess potential funding sources for necessary repairs, renovations, and ongoing maintenance. Conduct one or more public hearings and otherwise receive public comments. Recommend future uses of the building, and recommend funding sources for necessary repairs, renovations, and ongoing maintenance, and to present our final report to the City Council no later than June the 6th, 2023. So you can tell we made it just under the wire here today. You've already seen our task force members that are here. If I may, there are not very many, but I want to make sure everybody gets recognized, even those that are not here. We were chaired by Councilman Leonard Firestone. I, Glenn Lewis, was the vice chair. We had Lily Biggins, who's also with us remotely today, Lily Biggins. We had Johnny Campbell, Matt Carter, William Jerome, Matt Holman, Mike Hyatt, Wally Jones, Estella Martinez Stewart, Patrick Newman, Pat Riley, Dawn Taft, Scott Wilcox, and former Councilwoman Ann Zeta. We were also assisted by the city manager's staff very ably. We were assisted by the city manager's office, Communications and Public Engagement Department, Development Services, Economic Development, Finance, Fort Worth Lab, Law, Property Management, and Public Events. All of those staff people assisted us. The next thing you'll see on your screen here is the schedule of all the hearings. Now, I've already been told that all of you already got these and have already read them, and so I'm not gonna go down each date and see each date. They're on the screen. You can see them. Those were the dates that we had our respective hearings and did our functions. Next, we're gonna get into our task force findings, and as I said, they get greater minds than mine to get into this kind of detail, and to do that, I have my lifelong friend, Dr. John L. Barnett. Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank this group for allowing me as a representative of this task force to come before you. And would like to commend our task force for its diligent work in undertaking the task that was set before us. I am to present the task force findings. We first started with the building known as located at 1300 Gindy. And this building, as represented today, was constructed in 3 phases. The first phase was in 1954, and then there was a second phase in 1966, and then the final phase was 1976, and it represents the building as we know it today. As we look at the floor space, the gross floor space of that building is 83,064 square feet. But of that gross space, only 63,473 square feet is what we would term usable floor space, leaving 19,591 square feet that could be indicated as unusable in its present configuration. The source for this data was Bennett Partners, and it was presented May 18th, 2023. We got an estimated repair cost for the deferred maintenance on that building, and there were 8 components which were used to evaluate what we categorized in 2 columns. One was required repairs, and the other was recommended, and we included a total. As we go down those 8 components, the final figure at the bottom was that there was an estimated $26.1 million of deferred maintenance. Now, this figure represented $2,022. There was some banter or rough estimations that in today's dollars, 2023, that could near $30 million. That was not officially assessed, but just with inflation not necessarily representing an inflationary rate, that was a rough estimation that today we may be looking at 30 million, roughly $30 million in deferred maintenance to bring that building out of disrepair, including both the required and the recommended maintenance. To get an idea of where we started, we looked at the management and lease agreement with the Fort Worth Community Arts Center. Initially, that agreement was signed, consummated November 1st, 2005, and it was in 2 5-year renewals. There was an amendment after the first renewal, which was March 9th, 2011, where there was an agreement that the city would pay a management fee of $200,000 per year, plus electricity costs up to $1,000 per year, $100,000 per year. The second renewal took effect in 2015, and then there was a second amendment to the agreement on November 1st, 2020, which increased the renewal terms from 2 to 4. We are presently in the third renewal of this agreement with the city, and it will go through October 31st, 2005. We looked at this lease to get an idea, or this agreement to get an idea of where we started from. In this agreement also, we looked at and highlighted 3 sections which we deemed excerpts from the management lease, also to get some insight into where we started from with the agreement. The first section we paid attention to was section 2.1 in the condition of the building. And it states, just briefly, roughly on November 1st, 2005, the leasee accepted the lease premises in its present condition and finds them suitable and in good condition for the purposes intended. We also looked at section 2.1, reference to the addition of part C, which says the leasee agrees to use its granted writing and fundraising abilities in conjunction with the leaser to secure funding to enhance the condition of the building. And then the last, I'll just read an excerpt of the last section that we considered was on maintenance. And section 4.1 under maintenance says the leasee covets and agrees that will at its sole expense perform all upkeep, maintenance, and repair necessary to keep the leased premises and its operating systems in good condition and in compliance with all acceptable codes and requirements. We then looked at the activity in this building, and we used fiscal year 2019, which was pre-pandemic. The Community Arts Center welcomed 89,238 visitors. The Scott and Sanders Theaters hosted 54 clients for a total of 330 days. The galleries within the building served 917 visual artists, and they are listed their performances within that facility. Presently, as far as current residents, there are 14. There are 9 nonprofit subtenants, and then there are 5 studio artists, for a total of 14 current residents of the building. We looked at potential funding sources for repairs and renovations, and we outlined 6 that we felt would be appropriate and maybe inclusive. And they are the 2026 General Obligation Bond Program. Another option was certificates of obligation. Third option was tax notes. Another was hotel occupancy tax. Another was historic preservation tax credits. And then lastly, private capital. And these were potential sources of funds for repairs and renovation. We also then looked at potential funding sources for ongoing maintenance. And we came up with 3 options. One was that the tenants, as a condition of their lease, would provide funds that would be dedicated to ongoing maintenance. And then the second option was what we call pay-go funds in the annual budget that would be provided by the city to maintain the condition and stability of that building. The third option was some combination of the above 2. We had representatives from other public-private models on our task force committee, and we discussed how they manage their relationships. We had representatives from the Fort Worth Zoo, the Fort Worth Botanical Garden, and Dickies Arena. And they provided insights into how their private-public relationships functioned, and we tried to gather insight as to how that might be applied to 1300 Guindy in increasing its self-sustaining ability. The potential uses of the building were identified. One was the Fort Worth Community Arts Center as a potential use. Kids Who Care, both of these entities are presently occupying the building, Fort Worth Community Arts Center and Kids Who Care. The Conducting Institute, the Fort Worth African American Museum and Cultural Center. And then we looked at models from other cities, such as Lubbock, Texas, Tulsa, Kitchum, Idaho, Berlin, Germany, and many others, to see how a cultural institution of this nature was maintained and funded. And so we took these findings to mull them over, and there was very vigorous discussion that brought us to some conclusions based on our findings. And so thank you very much.
So good afternoon. I'm Ann Zeta, and it's very interesting to be on this side of things today. I was tasked with bringing you the part of the presentation where the public engagement came into play. We had an opinion survey, and we're going to talk a little bit about the results of that opinion survey, and we had a public meeting where there were some public comments. Are you advancing, or I can do it? Okay. So the public survey that went out started on March 8th and went through April 17th and had 1,311 survey responses to that survey. We asked how often people visited the Fort Worth Community Arts Center located at 1300 Guindy in the last 12 months, and 55% of those respondents indicated that they had been there 3 times or more. So those who do visit seem to visit pretty frequently. We asked if they visited the Community Arts Center during the past 12 months, what was the main purpose for their visit, and 66% visited the galleries, while 57% visited the theater. And you can see a breakdown of other things that occur in the Community Arts Center as it presently stands, performing arts classes and workshops, catering events and meetings, and other activities that go on in the center. But those were the top reasons for folks visiting the Community Arts Center. If you visited the Community Arts Center during the past 12 months, how would you assess your overall satisfaction with the experience? Which I think everybody who provides services in the Arts Center right now can be really proud of this number. I think 88% satisfaction or very satisfied in their visits to the Community Arts Center is a pretty good response from those who participate in the activities that happen there. If you have not visited the Community Arts Center as often as you would like, what was the reason that have kept you from doing so? It pains me greatly to share with you that 48% were deterred by the lack of free parking. This is something that comes up over and over again when we discuss places all over the city of Fort Worth. So that's definitely not a surprise, I think, in responses. 44% also expressed that there was a lack of awareness of what was going on in the center. I will add, just as commentary, I've seen in the last couple of years that the folks doing work in the Community Arts Center have gone to a great effort to increase knowledge and understanding about the things that are being offered in the Community Arts Center. Also talked about the location not being convenient for some, public transit being inconvenient. I'm happy to share with folks how to get there by public transportation because I think it is pretty easy to do so. So that's probably another lack of knowledge about how to do that. Living far away, COVID, busy schedules, et cetera, were also items that were brought up in the survey. What do you like most about the Community Arts Center? This is one of those word clouds where the more often that word was used in the survey respondents, the bigger the word is on the screen. So you can just get an overall impression of what some people are thinking about when they think about the Community Arts Center and what they like most about it by looking at this word bubble. And if we, what would you change about the Community Arts Center? Again, parking is up at the top. There's also some references to some of the conditions of the buildings, the restrooms, the building itself, accessibility, that sort of thing. So ADA accessibility, construction that is older and those kind of things that need to be addressed, and some other items. I can't read all those tiny, tiny little things, but I'm sure the survey results are available so people can see everything if they wanted to. There was a pretty even distribution of the ages of the respondents that answered this survey, so I think that's a nice response to have, that people from the very young to the older all enjoy the activities that they have in the Community Arts Center presently. The race of respondents was predominantly white, with 79% of those responding indicating that, that they are of white background. The gender identity of respondents, 69% women, and so even-ish, but probably more women enjoying the Community Arts Center at the present time. The respondents' place of residence. 32% live in districts 9, 7, and 3. 12% live in all the other districts. 27% don't know what district they live in. Also pains me greatly. There's a handy dandy little thing on the city's website where you can put your address in and find out who your council member is. I encourage everyone to do that. So in addition to the survey, on March 30th, we had a public meeting with more than 200 persons in attendance and 52 speakers who signed up to speak and share with us. And these images you can see in the Sanders Theater, the task force there to listen to the comments from the public and the people that were in that room, as well as the overflow room that was available for all of the folks that were coming to share their thoughts with us. See, these are some of the representative comments from those public meetings. As was stated before, you all received this packet, so I don't feel I should stand up here and read these, but these were really impactful statements, so I encourage you to read the ones that are provided on this screen. And in addition, I would encourage you, I know you had the task force do this work so that we could bring you recommendations, but this meeting was recorded and is available, and so I would encourage you to go and listen to some of the things that were shared at that meeting, because I think most of us can relate to the things that were shared there, those of us who have experienced the Community Arts Center over the years. So I encourage you to read these as well as go back and look at, and here's some additional representative comments from the public meetings. A lot of folks that have visited there, folks that have had the opportunity to share their work there, have brought their children there for the various things. I have recollections of bringing my own child there when he was probably 3 years old, when it was still the Modern Museum of Art. So these buildings have a long storied history in Fort Worth, and that was heard through many of these comments. And you'll recognize many of the names of the folks on these representative comments as well. So I will hand it over to Fernando Costa on the evaluation and development strategies that we considered.
Thank you, Ms. Zeta. Despite the difficulty and complexity of these issues associated with 1300 Gendy, the task force was successful in reaching consensus by following a logical process that involved research, public engagement, and data-driven discussion. You've just heard from Dr. Burnett about the fact-finding activities of the task force, and you've heard from Ms. Zeta about the outreach to the community. My task is to describe for you the process by which the task force identified and evaluated various possible development strategies, and after selecting a preferred option, used compromise to accommodate a variety of competing interests. And I think the task force can accept a great deal of credit for airing various viewpoints, but ultimately coming together to present a unified set of findings and recommendations to you today. They began by identifying three basic options for what could happen with the property at 1300 Gundy. The first is closest to the status quo. That's basically to make all necessary repairs and retain the existing uses of the building. We refer to that option as restoration. The second option, known as renovation, also involved making the necessary repairs, but renovating the building incrementally, remodeling the building, if you will, to accommodate new and complementary uses, as well as possibly retaining some existing uses. And finally, the most open-ended option is what we called redevelopment, which, as Mr. Firestone described earlier, involves reimagining 1300 Gundy as a world-class cultural hub and redeveloping the property accordingly. We would emphasize that all three options recognize the need for a new management model to be sustainable. The current model is not working to everyone's satisfaction, and therefore a new management model would be warranted irrespective of which of these three options the city would select. We then described the three options with respect to future uses, repair costs, renovation costs, maintenance costs, whether requests for proposals would be appropriate, the status of the lease agreement, and whether or not to seek historic designation for the building. In simplest terms, two basic factors tended to distinguish these three development strategies from each other. And those are the extent to which we would be preserving the existing building and the extent to which we would be preserving the existing uses of the building. And so the restoration option would preserve both the building and the uses. The renovation option would preserve the building, but not necessarily the uses. Those would be subject to a request for proposals. And finally, under the redevelopment option, both the existing building and the existing uses would be subject to reconsideration pursuant to a request for proposals process. The task force wanted to address the selection of a preferred option in a systematic manner and began, therefore, with a healthy discussion about the criteria that they should use to make that selection. And they selected a total of 7 criteria, which are defined in greater detail. And they include everything from health and safety, preservation, architectural impact, cultural impact, social, economic, and financial. Those are the 7 factors that the task force used to evaluate the different development strategies. And they recognized that not all factors are equally important. And so they wanted to weight those factors, weight those criteria as either somewhat important in assigning 1 point, highly important, 2 points, or exceptionally important with 3 points. They had a discussion among the task force. They decided to take a survey of each individual task force member, and the aggregate of their responses indicated that the 2 most important criteria in the minds of the task force members collectively were the cultural and economic impacts of the proposed strategy. And so you can see they got scores of 2.13 for cultural and 2.13 for economic. Those are the average weights that were assigned by the task force members. The lowest ranking criteria were preservation and architectural impact. They both got less than 1.5 points on the average. And so we rounded those numbers off And 5 of the 7 criteria got 2 points. The other 2 got 1 point. And those weights were assigned to the different scores given by task force members to the 3 development strategies. We asked the task force members to rate the 3 strategies with respect to the 7 criteria by assigning points. 0 points for unfavorable or no impact, 1 point for somewhat favorable, 2 for highly favorable, and 3 for exceptionally favorable impact with respect to that criterion. And here, without assigning names to the scores, we see how the different task force members rated the different development strategies. You can see that the redevelopment option got the highest average score by a significant margin, almost 26 points. Renovation was second at 24, and then restoration was third at 18 points. We also see that 8 of the 15 task force members who responded, a slight majority favored the redevelopment option as well. So both with respect to average score and with respect to the number of number 1 ratings, the redevelopment option came out on top. We can describe that redevelopment option, as we say, being to reimagine 1300 Gundy as a world-class cultural hub and redeveloping the property accordingly, issuing a request for proposals to redevelop the property, going nationwide, even globally, to get the best ideas about what should happen with the property at 1300 Gundy, entering into a long-term ground lease with a selected developer in 2024 or 2025. We anticipate that the ground lease could run approximately 40 years without legally representing a conveyance of the property to the developer. But as part of the process of compromising among various competing interests, the task force made several significant recommendations. First, expressing a preference that the selected developer incorporate the history and architecture of the existing building into the redevelopment proposal. The task force recognizes that the building is historically and architecturally significant and worthy of appropriate measures to preserve that history and architecture. Second, the task force expressed a preference that the selected developer include an incubator for emerging artists and arts organizations and include a theater, subject to economic feasibility. And finally, the task force decided that it would prefer the selected developer to include existing tenants of the building to the degree that it would be economically feasible to do so. The task force then discussed the criteria that the city should use in evaluating different development proposals. And these criteria run parallel to the criteria that the task force itself used to evaluate the 3 development strategies. And so in rating the development proposals that we receive later this year, should the council decide to proceed with the request for proposals process, we would assign 45 out of 100 points to each proposal based on the development concept that it represents. And within those 45 points, we would use the 7 criteria to allocate the points so that cultural and economic impact would each get 10 points. The other 5 criteria would get 5 points each for a total of 45 points. Another 45% of the rating for the development proposals would be associated with the quality of the development team, the professional qualifications, relevant experience, and ability to deliver the project on time and within budget. So 15 points each for a total of 45%. Public engagement is another important factor, and the task force wanted to assign 10 points for public engagement. How well does the development team propose to engage the public in making decisions about what should happen at 1300 Gundy? So that's a total of 100 points. And then business equity, the extent to which the proposal meets the city's 15% goal, of minority, women and minority business participation would not be assigned a score as such. It would be pass-fail. So if a proposal fails to meet the 15% goal, then it would not qualify for further consideration. It would be disqualified at that stage. The task force is recommending a 5-person evaluation committee to be comprised of 3 department heads, Robert Stearns from Economic Development, Mike Crum from Public Events, and Steve Cook from Property Management, along with 2 community stakeholders who are members of the task force, Leonard Firestone and Lily Biggins. We appreciate Mr. Firestone and Ms. Biggins being willing to serve in that capacity. Madam Mayor, council members, we'd like to ask Mr. Lewis to step back to the lectern and share with us a summary of conclusions, recommendations, and next steps. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Fernando. I want to emphasize to the mayor and the council that we gave all of this very serious consideration. You know, obviously, this is a building that has some significance to our city, but it's an old building. The first phase was born in this city the same year I was born in this city. and so it's an old building, and it's showing its age. As you've seen, we're talking a $30 million investment just to do the deferred maintenance on the building, and that's before you start retrofitting it for a new purpose. Some of you may be wondering, well, did y'all consider that the city should just sell the building? Yes, we did, the very first day. And we all, I think unanimously decided on the first day that we were not going to recommend that this building be sold. We thought this building was important to the city of Fort Worth, and it is worth making the effort to redevelop it, but we recognize that the redevelopment must make financial sense also. And we did not have developers around the table with us on this committee, but we know that there are developers out there who have done these kind of public-private partnerships and have figured out how to make it work. And so that's why we decided we would put out for RFP and allow some of them to come forward with proposals for this building. Its long-standing use is important. And we realize when we say public-private partnership, we do think that there will be some cost to the city. But we think it's worth the city to have a world-class cultural center, to be the kind of city that we love and want to be in Fort Worth. We have to be willing to make some investment in those kinds of cultural endeavors. We have to be willing to do that. But again, it needs to make financial sense, though. And we think people who have developed these kind of public-private partnerships and are in the business of doing that and have done that in the past are better equipped to understand or know how that can be done than we are. And so that's why we recommended that you go to an RFP process for this. And I think everything else I have on my cheat sheets here, I have already mentioned. I just mentioned them in my own way. I'm not in the habit of getting up and reading my remarks. I look at what I want to cover and then I make my remarks. So that's what we've come up with. We commend that to the council and the mayor and the city manager, and we hope you give it careful consideration. Thank you. I'm prepared to answer any questions anybody may have.
Thank you, Glenn. Questions from council members? Carlos?
Glenn, thank you very much for the presentation. And I guess my question really kind of falls under the approach category. You know, what is most suitable? This would, I guess, fall under renovation or redevelopment. And when it goes to the specifics of how many people can you accommodate in the theater, and I'm trying to think of the economics, right? With the current theater space, per your average visitation, I mean, is it adequate? Do you need for more theater space? Because if you're going to, say that as far as the weighting of your evaluation criteria, social ranks second, and social reads impact upon the size and diversity of the building's visitor base. So if you want to, I read in that you want to grow, your visitor base, which is, which makes sense to me. But physically, as it is right now, can the theater accommodate enough people? If you have a live performance, say, can it accommodate enough people there?
Well, and again, that's why we want to go to the RFP, because none of us on that task force are experts in that area. And, I like to stay in my lane. I don't like to start making comments about things that I have no expertise in. And that's why we wanted to go to RFP, and that's why most of the people wanted to go reimagining or redevelopment rather than simply renovation, because we didn't want to tie a developer's hands. We wanted to make this as broad as possible so that they could come in and have the opportunity to propose something that would serve the best interests of the city.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Macy?
Well, first, I wanted to commend the task force on all the hard work that y'all have done. I know this was difficult, and Fernando, you alluded to it, but you had a lot of competing interest in the room, and I think y'all had some really difficult conversations. And I really do applaud the RFP where you've ended. I think it addresses the needs, but keeps it pretty wide and open to have a developer come in and give us some really great ideas to not only provide some great space for the artists, because we do need to develop the artist community, and that's part of the fabric of District 7 and Fort Worth, frankly. But also to make sure that we can sustain whatever building is there. There needs to be a revenue stream, and I think that the developers that respond to this RFP are going to speak to the community. They're going to talk to the artist community and understand what their needs are. And you spoke to just a minute ago. I think I'm anxious to see what they're going to come back with. So thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? Michael?
Thanks again for all of y'all putting together, and you talked about the people on the task force, but you've got a lot of other supporters in here in the room as well. So thanks for y'all sitting through our craziness today and giving the presentation. And one of the things I want to say, thank you, former Councilman Leonard Firestone, for being the smartest man in the room and not being in this room. Appreciate your service for all that you did to lead this through. I know it was a lot of community engagement, a lot of people passionate about this, about what happens with that building. And one of the things I don't want to see, and I see happen, is that community engagement fall apart. I want it still be the community engaged as this process goes through. And there's a lot of good folks that have been out there as far as we need a space for artists. And I want to make sure that Arts Fort Worth is still a part of that conversation, and they're doing a lot of good work in there, as well as you named out Kids Who Care. Deborah's in the room, and my girls went through that program and had a lot of great memories myself in there with the theater and everything else, so I want to thank them. But I think we also have something on the table too, good public-private partnerships. The zoo, Dickey's, Botanic Gardens working now, that we can figure this out, and it makes sense to sort of move forward in that path and figure out a good public-private partnership as this redevelopment happens that's inclusive of everybody and gives artists a space to collaborate and everything here in Fort Worth. So I just want to put that on the table and say thanks for all y'all's hard work.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council members? No, it's already been stated. I think this was why we did the task force option rather than just arriving at a decision when Leonard and I first started having these meetings with Fernando, that we knew we needed to do something to move forward on the Community Arts Center. And this was the right decision because this council could have come to a conclusion by ourselves. But I think in this way, to Michael's point, the entire community was engaged and more to come. Do we have any questions or comments related to the timeline here, council, that you see before you that's also in your Dropbox, Chris? No problem. We're all good with the timeline. It looks aggressive in a good way, like we're going to move forward as quickly as possible. Maybe I'll just alert staff that if we feel for any reason any of these dates aren't going to work, let's make sure we well publicize those, especially through Councilmember Hill's office and also through Leonard and Lily, who are going to keep shepherding us through this process. Yes, Gina.
I didn't know this was my chair, so that's why I just got here. I was texting Chris asking, where are you? Why are you late? Why aren't you here? Sorry, old lady. But he's here. I was listening to the presentation, it just kept, it was compelling for me to realize just how, point by point, on point this presentation was. And it dawned on me that the makeup of the committee is what gives the strength. If you're coming to City Hall, it helps to have a former city council member on your team. And when you get the immediate past council member, there's no way that they can go wrong. I like the idea of the incubator that is so necessary. People will stop having to go to Dallas for stuff like that. But it's just a great presentation with no questions for me. And just so you know, Dr. John Barnett's dad was my elementary school principal. And my goal before I finished being impressive anywhere is to get that school renamed after his dad. So I'm putting that out here right now. So, but I mean, this is perfect presentation. And I sent all of you all pictures of yourselves. And so for my friends who hounded me saying, why aren't you paying attention? I was getting the right shot for each one. So great presentation.
That's great, Gina. Okay, Glenn, thank you very much for presiding over our meeting today.
Brief comment, Mayor, since Gina brought it up. That elementary school where Dr. Barnett's father was the principal, I attended at the same time she did. So.
I love it. That's wonderful. Thank you all very much for coming. And for those of you in the audience, thank you. Okay, council, we have one additional presentation, an update on streamlining commercial development. Dana Bergdorf is going to kick things off. Dana, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on our continuing efforts to streamline commercial development. We know how important this is to Mayor and council. It's one of the most important items on David Cook's work plan, not just this year, but in other years as well. And I do want to recognize the support that we've had from Mayor and council in continuing to do this good work, but also support from the management team and all the departments that touch the development process. You heard a taste of that earlier with DJ and Robert Stearns talking about their work with the Small Business Task Force, but there's a lot of good things happening, and so we're excited to bring this to you. But of course, we know we have a lot more to come. So I want to provide a brief overview for you of commercial development. We'd like to review with you the 10 recommendations that came to Mayor and Council early this year from the Real Estate Council of Greater Fort Worth. They actually mirror some of the recommendations we also received from the Chamber of Commerce through interviews they conducted with developers, particularly conducted by Jay Chapa, our former deputy city manager, so we had a lot of insight into our development process, but want to review the city actions that we've taken to date and give a heads up with things to come. So you all provided your city council strategic priorities, and I know I'll be working through your goals specific to these priorities as the new council members are onboarded. We believe that improving the commercial development process and our customer service and that customer experience really touches on all of your strategic priorities: economic development, community safety, of course, responsible growth, which all supports overall quality of life. As I mentioned, this is a high priority with the city manager's work plan, especially improving customer service, and then continuing to improve our development review process. And then touching on the values of accountability, exceptional customer experience, and continuous improvement. So we've received a lot of kudos from the development community about the Development 101 workshop that DJ, his team, and other departments participated in a few weeks ago, and I stole one of the slides that they created and modified it a little bit, but I thought it would be helpful for you all to see that development is not necessarily a simple process, depending on what you need to do in order to do your project. You need to look at the land. You need to understand if there's land development that's required, entitlements that are required. Then you need to understand the infrastructure, both on-site infrastructure and what's required for public infrastructure, water, wastewater, streets, and stormwater. And then you can get to the buildings, right? So in some cases, if you're dealing with a small business, they generally are just in that right-hand column, right? Trying to work through remodel permits and certificates of occupancy. But a lot of the heavy lifting and where some of the conflicts come up is when you're working on that land development, getting the entitlements, and then working through infrastructure. So we're fortunate that we've got experts in all of these areas to work through this, but you can understand where complexities arise and where it's a continuous process to make sure that we're providing that excellent customer service. So I did want to talk about the word Excella. The folks touched on that earlier in terms of improvements to our website and linking that to Excella. So that's the enterprise software that we use for all things development. And all the departments that touch development use that software system. I'm happy to report that we had a really successful upgrade of that system from our servers, internal servers, to cloud-based in March. Valiant effort with development and our IT solutions department. So as far as I understand, no real glitches with that. The reason that's important is that 100% of our commercial development customers use Excella. So it's important that that be reliable for our customers and also for our staff to do their jobs. I understand that with the upgrade, it's a little bit faster, just waiting, when you have to click a few times and you're waiting on the system to process, as that's gotten faster, that's been good for us, and as well as for our customers. So the other piece in terms of an overview is just as a reminder, there's a lot of permits that we deal with, so almost 20,000 in the year 2022. But drilling down to commercial specifically, of that, about 2,700 are commercial permits, 1,300 for new construction. So again, as you're thinking about those things that can become more complex, as we're drilling down, the 487 commercial lots that we platted, and then the 67 community facility agreements that we executed for those projects that needed to provide public infrastructure. As you kind of make your way down your list, that's where you get into the more complex, work and the emphasis that we need to provide. So briefly, this is an overview of the multi-page memo we received. It was a lot of great insights from the Real Estate Council early this year. Number one, expanding the positive improvements that we've made in development services to other departments. And I'm pleased to report that we've had great buy-in from all the departments that touch development, whether that's fire, code, water, TPW, parks, law, and so on. Instilling that culture of problem solving across departments, resolving internal conflicts for customers so that they're not getting a comment from one team and then a comment from another team, and they've got to resolve that conflict, that the staff need to help step in and resolve that. Finally, creating that one-stop shop, putting all the pertinent staff together on the same floor in our future city hall, continuing our regular business process improvement meetings, investing in customer service training, hosting an annual a semi-annual forum that the city manager would host with staff and developers, investing in employee retention and internal promotion, and we'll talk more about that, and then investing resources in our legal department, since they support all of the agreements and many of all the entitlement processes that we work through. So I've circled here, going back to that original slide, that infrastructure column, because that's where we have challenges. That's where we're seeing a lot of turnover and hiring challenges, particularly for engineers. And so that's not specific just to the Development Services Department, that's affecting others as well. And you heard Deanna Giordano talk about some of our hard-to-fill positions, and that affects this team especially, but not just this team. So, city approach for 2023. So we've got some specifics that we'll get into, but just in the way of an overview, providing that training and skill development in all of our departments that touch development is something that's really important. And so I'm excited that we have a wonderful program that HR has put together with development services and others, and we'll have Deanna Giordano come up in just a moment to talk about that. In addition, we'll have Deanna talk about how they're addressing pay equity, both internal and external, with our market competitiveness and addressing those hard-to-fill positions. And then lastly, I'll come back up and talk about the one-stop shop, both organizationally, how are we addressing that this year, as well as changes that may come in the future, but also what can we do in terms of the virtual one-stop shop, because again, all of our customers are going through that Excella interface. So at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Deanna. Thank you.
So Deanna Giordano, HR Director, and I want to start off with what we're doing as it relates to the customer service or exceptional customer service experience. And so customer experience is one of our core values here at the City of Fort Worth. And one of the things that you saw in the summary report that was provided by the Real Estate Council and the other entity was some just basic customer service requirements that weren't being achieved. And so the HR team has spent a lot of time developing course content and course curriculum. And I really want to describe it as skill development because as I explained to you kind of the amount of time and energy that individuals will be required to go through, it really does build upon a skill and around customer service and the exceptional customer experience. And it's really creating that wow factor. So the same factor that you have when you engage with an entity where you have a great customer service experience, that's what we want our customers to walk away with. We want our employees to go above and beyond to help individuals kind of navigate the waters that may be unknown to them. We also want them to show a sense of urgency because to the developers in that community, it is an urgent item that they want attention with. Also just adhering to deadlines, being responsive, giving customers options where options may exist, and then also a consistent customer experience so that no one customer has a different experience, but they all have the same experience when they engage with employees that are part of this process. And ultimately, it really addresses that problem-solving culture. So every employee is acting in that capacity where they're owning that experience with the individual that they may be dealing with. So here's what it looks like. And when I talk about skill development, it's pretty intense. It's a 4-week program where individuals from all 9 city departments to touch the development process will spend 28 hours of blended learning. And part of that is they're going to have instructor-led course content, about 24 hours. And then also some self-paced continuous learning, things that they can do at their own speed in their own time. In addition to that, we'll also have peer-to-peer sessions, and then we'll also create a checklist and tools for supervisors to follow up to make sure that what we're teaching and what we're communicating is actually being done in the actual work environment. So it's a pretty intense skill development program around exceptional customer experience. We launched the program on May 17th, and as I noted, it's a 4-week program, so we're actually in week 4 of that program now. Part of it includes a self-assessment that they did at the onset of the training, and during week 4, they have another assessment so we can gauge, are they actually retaining the information that's being taught? We have close to 400 employees that will be participating in the curriculum that's been designed, and we've had about 50 employees that participated during the first kind of cohort of the exceptional customer experience training. I'm going to speak to some of the retention efforts that have been made as it relates to pay and hard-to-fill positions. And so we've had a lot of pay-related activities that have been implemented just this fiscal year alone. And so in October of 2022, at the request of this council and this body, the minimum entry rate was raised to $15 an hour. That did affect individuals that touch the Development Services Program, and so that minimum entry was raised. In addition, we adjusted the salary structure, and so all of our minimum entry rates and our maximum entry rates were adjusted 4%. And so that made us a little more competitive in attracting individuals to the organization. In November of 2022, we implemented the pay for performance, so it's based on the prior fiscal year's evaluation of employees and their contributions to the organization. In this particular year, we allowed the department directors to exercise awarding individuals based on their performance evaluations up to a 7% increase in pay. In December of 2022, we had additional monies that were set aside, and part of it was because Fort Worth was dealing with the same issues that every other company is dealing with. Turnover, we have more jobs than people, we want to retain the individuals, and it was some of the feedback that we received from the Real Estate Council. There was high turnover, so it created more learning opportunities that were necessary for people to have to be able to provide that service. And so for development services specifically, we looked at their jobs in comparison to other city jobs, and we made recommendations anywhere between a 3% to a 7% pay adjustment for development services employees. For those employees that did not receive a 3 or up to 7% increase, we had an additional set aside of monies that resulted in a 2% or a 3% adjustment, market competitiveness adjustment based on performance. And so every employee, just about every employee in development services received some additional compensation as it related to market competitiveness. And then you just heard me speak earlier today, June of 2023, so June the 3rd, just this past Saturday, we had an additional 2.5% added for hard-to-fill positions. And it affected just under 50% of employees in the Development Services Department. So what's the effect of that? You'll see it here, 89 employees that reside in positions that are either considered high turnover, where there's some professional license requirement. You heard Dana mention engineers. That's a great example. Some of the combination inspectors or the inspectors in development services receive this 2.5%. There's a number of positions that employees join the city through some of the entry-level positions, and then there's internal movement. Well, they'll promote into other positions, which is great. But we also want to recognize that it creates that competitive market, so we added a 2.5% for those positions as well, and then positions with just limited applicant pools. So that's where we advertise the role. It'll be 2 weeks in advertisement, and we'll have as little as 10 applicants or less. And so again, 45% of development services employees occupy hard-to-fill positions. Those individuals received a 2.3% pay increase effective Saturday. What is the effect on turnover? So as you heard me say, we had a lot of pay changes that were affected this fiscal year. And so this gives you just the turnover for development services. And you'll see that it spiked in end of calendar year 2022, where we're sitting at about a 19% turnover rate for both voluntary and involuntary. At the end, as of May, end of May, for this calendar year 2023, we're sitting at 8%. So we're seeing that we're making improvements, and we attribute that to a lot of the pay adjustments that have occurred, as well as just other decisions and cultural engagements that the Development Services Department has been involved with to make sure that we can retain and attract individuals to these jobs. Those pay decisions were applied citywide. And so here's just kind of the citywide effect of what we're seeing as it relates to turnover. And so we're sitting just about 11% end of calendar year 2022, and now we're sitting just below 4% for calendar year 2023. So again, we're attributing that to some of the pay decisions as well as some of the other investments that we're making in the workforce. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Dana.
All right, thank you, Deanna, that was great. All right, so let me jump into the one-stop shop element. And so I'll start with the organization side. You may have seen the t-shirts that I work for DJ and David works for DJ, and now we all work for DJ. But we did have a serious message that we wanted to send to all the departments that touch the development process, which is if there's an issue or a challenge that you're not able to resolve, elevate it, kick it up. Let's get development engaged to help resolve that and give those staff that authority to solve those problems. And so just to lay it out for you, there are basically 3 assistant directors or assistant director equivalents in development services that would have that role as needed, either they or their managers, to step in and help solve problems that involve other departments. So for example, with fire, that would get elevated so that the building official within development services would be able to step in, work with the fire team and get that issue resolved. And so then you'll see beyond the other examples. So code, whether it's a health permit or something else, that the building official would be able to step in, water for backflow and grease traps. Then as we step down to infrastructure, TPW, say if it's a floodplain permit, or they oversee the infrastructure inspections for developer and city-led infrastructure, with water, applications, taps, and their studies. And then lastly, the assistant director who works in project facilitation and platting, the Parks Department, where they interact with park dedication and easements through parks. So that's sort of the org chart, if you will, of how those issues and challenges can get bumped up so that they can get resolved timely. In addition, we're just, as Deanna mentioned, part of our training and continual messaging is that we want the staff to work across teams to resolve conflicts and not be stuck in whatever team or silo that they're in, but to know that they can cross those boundaries and work to resolve conflicts, and that they need to see themselves as development partners, not just as reactors to what's coming through the door, but to begin to have some ownership over the projects that are coming in and help to get those projects on the ground. And then, of course, elevate issues as needed. And then we'll be holding folks accountable with pay for performance based on their ability to demonstrate those skills. We are considering adding positions for commercial development. In this fiscal year, as DJ mentioned, he's got his small business facilitator assigned, but he also reclassified a position to add a senior facilitator because, again, development can be complex regardless of where it's housed, and so having that facilitator, that handholder, can be very helpful. And so as we go through this budget year, we'll look at requests for additional facilitators, engineers, plan reviewers, attorneys, and so on for the fiscal year 24 budget. So just know that those requests have come in, and we'll be evaluating those in the coming months. So then switching to future City Hall, the one-stop shop. I think you've heard Tanyan with the Athenian Group talk about our plans for future City Hall. So that first full office floor above the lobby is the 5th floor, and that would be the customer service floor. In today's current City Hall, what we have today, we have development services, we have fire, and we have water, and all on that lower level along with finance. But these other departments are on different floors or even in different buildings. And so this will be our first time to bring everybody together on the same floor. We'll also have touchdown space. You know, the law department will be on a different floor, of course, but we have lots of meeting space, whether it's a in-person or virtual meeting. This floor will house the X-Team meeting room, again, which can also be virtual for folks who are getting those express permits. We'll have our commercial walk-in center, so a lot of great services here. And then in addition to development, we'll also have other customer-facing services here as well, whether you want to pay a water bill in person or get certain utility assistance or affordable housing assistance. Some of those services will be here as well. So now switching from organizational to online. So we mentioned Excella. So having all of those processes in Excella has been our priority, and so that's generally in place. We mentioned the One Stop Business website. I encourage you to take a look at it, see if you have any thoughts or questions about that. If you just go to our Fort Worth website and just type in business, it's the website that will come up for you. DJ mentioned the commercial development guide that's been created. We've got the restaurant guide and another small business guide that's on its way. So a lot of great work there for the online experience. But what's in the works now is integrating Excella with other software that we use. You may recall that a couple of years ago, we rolled out a permit assist tool to help folks who are maybe wanting to get a commercial building permit or find out what their zoning is. You enter in some data, you answer a number of questions, and it gives you a list of permits and the costs for those, so you're ready to go. But unfortunately, today, once you've entered in all that data, you then turn around to go apply for the permit, you've got to re-enter all that data into Excella. So now we're trying to integrate those two software platforms so that it's one and done. So one touch, one set of data entry, so we're excited about that. Similarly, integrating our plan review software with Excella so that if you're looking at building plans or infrastructure plans, those comments and revisions are going back and forth seamlessly for the customers to be able to see that transparently. We're adding infrastructure studies and then the timelines associated with them into Excella. So that was one of the items that we heard from the Real Estate Council that they had had some challenges with. Again, somewhat related to vacancies, but also just not knowing what to expect. And so now we'll have standardized timelines, communications, workflows. That'll be a great improvement. And then lastly, we're excited about some of the automated notices for status changes. So not just when you apply for something, but if you're submitting a revision or if there's some comments that have come back, whatever that status change is, everyone's immediately notified. So that should help speed things up. So for the rest of this year, as Deanna mentioned, we hope to complete that customer service training for about 400 employees. We want to complete those integrations and the other streamlining that's in process. The Real Estate Council is recently wrapping up their spring survey for developers and have included city staff in that conversation. So we want to have our first semi-annual forum that I mentioned that we'll schedule with them to hear that new feedback as well as report out what the results that we've made, but to see what needs to come next, and then of course consider those staff resources during the budget process. So let me stop there and see what questions or suggestions or concerns that you might have for us.
Hey, Dana. I was told that IT and the neighborhood team are looking at some issues as to why the GIS information pulled to do our notifications isn't always happening the way it's intended. I know that there was an in-house script that was written to address, that, and that IT is working hard on it. But I'm trying to put together in my mind how this ties into what, you're presenting here. So what is the issue with pulling the GIS data? Is it the fact that Acela is not a GIS-based software suite, that you need a script, to make that translation? And what does that have to do with the Bluebeam software integration?
Sure, so I may need DJ to help me with that, but when we first purchased Acela, you're correct, it did not integrate with our geographic information system, which is through Esri software. And so, so now that I think Acela has with the upgraded Acela that we have, we've now got some functionality that'll be coming. So if you can describe that for me, please.
No, exactly. So with the upgrade, that's what we get support with the GIS function. So it's always been there, but we hadn't purchased that portion of the software. So from now on, we'll be able to go into Acela, and you could select the location. It'll tell you all the permits, all the plats, all the zoning cases, all the history of development, permit types on that particular tract of land. You asked about Bluebeam. So the Bluebeam, we're going to utilize that for plan review. Okay. So currently we use what's called EDR, electronic document review. And basically we review plan sets, we type up comments in the text, right, and place it onto the record. What we think we would like to do is put the comments directly on the plan set, with all those comments directly on the plan set, that the applicant can see exactly what location needs to change, right? It's widely used in the engineering community, and we think we can use it for building permits and all of our infrastructure permit types as well.
Yeah, well, it makes sense that, when Dana said that most of our customers use that software, understood. I was just wondering what was the, the issues with functionality, right? Didn't know if all our data, especially historical data, had any kind of GIS information, and that was a problem with it translating. But what you're saying is now, we have, if you call it a software upgrade, a patch, a module, whatever, that is being purchased, or that is purchased already?
It is purchased. It's being implemented now.
All right. So what's this script that's being written? I mean, what is that? Then what does that do?
Are you talking about zoning notifications?
Yes, specific to notifications.
Okay, so I think that may be a different process where they determine the 300-foot and the half-mile notification process. So I think that's
So that's specific to that particular
That's specific
function
to
we
that
do, okay.
particular function for zoning cases.
Okay, so
But I'll look into that, yeah. We
it sounds
talked
like
to
we're doing
Stephen
kind of
and-
an in-house solution to that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I guess we have to have extra set of eyes to make sure that we do capture the correct notifications, that the correct notifications do go out?
Well, it'll be a lot easier once we can use this software to do this automatically.
Right.
But for right now, I think for notifications in the 300-foot buffer, we just create a buffer in the GIS system, and then we pull an attribute table out that gives us a list of name and addresses, and then we mail to those names and addresses. Sometimes those name and addresses are outdated. It pulls the data. The parcel data comes from Tarrant County. And so sometimes people buy or sell or rent or lease, right? And it doesn't get to the right person. And I don't know that this will solve that issue.
Sure.
But we'll continue to work on,
But let's dig into that and make sure we understand the issue that you're raising.
Yeah, and again, specific to the notification.
Yes.
Yes, as I started out my comments, I was wanting to connect in my mind if that's only specific to that, or is there a larger, matter going on? Okay, but I think I'm clear, enough on that. Okay, thanks.
Gina.
Kudos to staff. Dana, time you said plug in business and you'll see things pop up. And believe it or not, I was actually smiling while you were talking because I was seeing it just come up. And so that's a real good deal. On the topic of training, I hear a lot about staff training, but I encourage you all to think about ways that we on the council get in your way, and I know we do, you don't have to be polite. But that too is an opportunity for training, because I think there's a way to backdoor the complaints that we may bring to your staff, and the ones that you hear more frequently present an opportunity for council training.
Sure.
And so, keep that in mind. And I would like to have the opportunity to audit some of the training, just to, Sandy is going to be with me part-time now, but I can't depend on her for everything now. But just know that I know staff council gets in the way. And I think this is a perfect time for you all to identify ways that we do, so that as we are advocating for our constituents who may often not have a real good grasp on reality, you can use those as training opportunities as well.
Certainly. Well, thank you for that. And we can share the Development 101 link for that training and upcoming trainings as those come along as well. That'd be great. Thank you.
Jared.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, to your point, sometimes we get pulled into the way as well. And one of the ways we do is, and this is to Mayor Pro Tem's point earlier, is sometimes developers, especially nonprofit developers, when they're going through this process, may not know all of the scope of fees that impact their project, and then they get to a point where they're stuck because they have to do a certain, make a certain improvement that costs a lot that they didn't know about. I don't know how that fits within your plan going forward, but I know we spend a lot of time on helping developers get unstuck from that. Can you speak to how do we as council members help you in that process, especially in the one-stop shop?
Sure.
process?
So you're right. So there's, and obviously, again, DJ will have some great examples of this, but we've got, we rely on pre-development meetings as well as pre-plat meetings for developers and their engineers to come in and learn about, what the red flags might be. In some cases, they may submit plans and show us the public infrastructure, and until we see what they're doing on the private infrastructure, we don't realize that there's a conflict. And sometimes it's just a matter of peeling the onion of going, oh, now we realize that we just had this example recently, your private stormwater is gonna, conflict with our drain line or our sewer line, and we gotta work through that. So sometimes it's uncovered as we work through those processes with them. But we do think that having in some cases, making sure that the mindset of our engineers is one of being facilitators, right? The mindset of whether it's a plans examiner or a planner or an engineer, that they all have that same mindset that they are facilitators themselves. But then in addition, that we identify those complex projects where, or small business projects where having a facilitator would really be helpful, just that we know we're going to run into issues, and so having someone who can bring folks together quickly will be helpful. So that's part of what we're working through, is identifying what do we facilitate today, and what is the gap in what we facilitate, and what could we do about that?
That's huge, and I know y'all are thinking a whole lot about that. I just wanted to share it as well.
No, but
to
thank
be
you, yeah.
helpful. And
Yeah.
also, I just want to thank, your team, DJ, the other departments, as well as David. I know we've been talking about this as a council individually and collectively, consistently. And so thank y'all for getting us to this point, and I look forward to, the request for the staff resources, especially that facilitation piece. I really appreciate it. I think it's a good plan, and I'm happy to see it.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you. I don't want to belabor it. It's been a long day already, but thank you. I know there's been a lot of time and effort put into this. And David, I thank you for your leadership. Dana, your leadership. DJ, across the board, everybody, because I know this is a big step for us, and continuing to do this, Deanna, with the customer service piece, which we've talked about for sure, seeing some great things put on the board here. Just want to say thank you.
Sure, thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I see now Tom Galbraith is in the audience, and I apologize, representing the Real Estate Council and former chair of our Development Advisory Committee. So thank you, Tom, for being here. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Any other questions from council? Very encouraging, lots of teamwork. Thank you. And Deanna, I think kudos to you too for stepping in to be of assistance, development services at the Real Estate Council. So thank you. Yes. Thanks, Dana. Okay, council, that's the last of our presentations. Future agenda items. Gina.
This is, if I can read my own writing, okay. I'd like a report from legal and police detailing the nuisance case process. What does it take to get a nuisance removed from your neighborhood? In addition, with that overall knowledge, I'd also like to have them give us, choose from 2021 to date, How many cases have we filed? How many have we won? How many are in play? And just overall, because surely throughout this entire city, there are business establishments creating problems. And unless citizens really know that it's important that they turn that information in so that we can make a nuisance case, then we don't have people on the same page. And I know that this won't be immediate, but this is, let's say, a couple of months. Leanne, you think?
We can do that after the break, sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a request for an IR to, I think this is feasible. We'll let staff make that determination. Provide notification for zoning cases when there is a continuance. That is a separate continuance to notify interested parties that a zoning case has been continued.
Do you want to ask your? So I'd like an IR on the process, the guidelines for door-to-door salesmen to register in the city, and specifically what we do for repeat offenders or violators of that particular ordinance. I'd also like to see, I know it's been a while since we've looked at that ordinance, and so I'd like to also have a review of what other cities are doing, because I've gotten some complaints from constituents about specifically security company coming very late in the evening. And so they seem very exasperated by it, and I think 9 o'clock is a little late, and so I want to make sure they're safe, the people going door to door are safe, and that we have best practices in the city.
I actually had a question. I don't know if it's offline or not, but I looked at the 90-day calendar. I know we're supposed to be closed on the 20th. Are we having that special call meeting for the? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know Beck and I won't be here, so I don't know if we're gonna make sure if it's gonna be a quorum issue.
It's only, the special call on the 20th is for canvassing and swearing in of D11. So fortunately, we only need 2 for quorum for canvassing. The more that can be there, the better.
Micah won't be here, we won't be here.
Okay.
We'll pull around each other and make sure.
All right. Okay.
Anybody else I missed? If not, okay, meeting adjourned. Thank y'all.